Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms where I give you a heads up about upcoming shows and which date and time they will be aired. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the shows, MP3 files which you can download, or links to your favorite platform like iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and all other major sources. You can find information for upcoming and past talk show appearances as well as new book projects at MarlenePardo.com. You can also purchase books and merchandise there. And you can visit my author page on Amazon at Marlene Pardo Pellicer. Due to popular demand, I'm narrating my True Believer stories that I've collected throughout the years in a new series called Supernatural Storytime. You can find links at supernaturalstorytime.com. If you are into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate some of those at Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If you would like to read noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I do want to thank you all for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing today? Good, I hope. I'm doing well. The farm is doing well. My chickens are doing well. My trees are doing well. A lot of rain, which, as you guys have heard from me before, is a good thing. Even when you're a micro farmer, rain is a good thing. We've had a few dry days, which is good. It's good. It's, when you get one extreme or the other, that's when things get crazy. But yeah, things are good. And it's really funny because I'm going into the stores and I'm seeing things for Halloween and Christmas. I walked into a Walmart and they've got Christmas trees up and I'm like, wait, stop, wait. Especially in South Florida where, we're hitting like 90 degrees every day. And it's like, yeah, I'm used to that as far as the Christmas season. It wouldn't be the first Christmas I had where it was in the 80s, but still it's like, wait, hold on. It's really funny. All the gardening stuff is gone. Everything is gone. And I walked in and as a matter of fact, one of the guys was, I usually putter around in the gardening department. So I've known some of the employees that have been there a while, and they had used one of the guys to put up all the fake trees up, and he was like, yeah, and he connected them because some of them light up. And I walked in there because the display is right when you walk into the store out of the gardening department, and it was like, huh? Christmas trees? So to me it was like, okay, reality check time. Here we go into what I call the home stretch of the year. Okay, which is Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and then a new year all over again. It's like, what happened? What happened? So yeah, it's like, and sometimes I guess, and I, like I said, I've lived here all my life, but we don't have the seasons like when you go to other parts of the country that you have this, like the Indian summer, and then the weather starts turning chilly, and then eventually if you got any snowfall where you're at. I don't have any of that. But the only thing here I would say is that once which by the way we've got our fingers crossed because now in November we get out of hurricane season. And a few weeks ago we had Dorian, which we were like, oh God, thank God, even though it just like it wiped out the Bahamas. But anyway, the good thing for us, besides that the temperature gets a little bit better and drier, is of course the end of the hurricane season. But we don't have that demarcation. It's subtropical here, so again, yeah, you do that double take. But anyway, let's get to the good part. The good part is who I have as a guest, and today I have a very interesting guest. Her name is Deborah Moffitt, Debbie Moffitt, and let me tell you a little bit about her story. Okay. The Moffitts were a typical American family until the caretaker of their ailing grandmother performed an ancient ritual intended for healing, but instead unleashed a powerful and terrifying demon, one of the 7 princes of the devil himself. Not surprisingly, their lives were torn apart as this malevolent entity haunted and tormented them for 8 years, even following them outside of their home. And in other shows we've talked about situations like this are happening to some family or individuals. Now, dozens of notable light workers came to rid them of this powerful evil monster, but to no avail. A promise of revenge from a past life was the bridge that brought him into their lives, and the secret permission of one family member that was allowed, which is what allowed the demon to stay. The demon set his sinister intentions on an unholy and deadly blood sacrifice and the taking of an eternal soul. And the family had to fight for its sanity, life, and salvation. This is a true story, so please help me in welcoming Debbie Moffitt. How are you doing today, Debbie?
I'm fine, thank you.
Let me tell you something. I'm reading that, and it's not the first time I read it, and wow. But I'm going to ask you what I ask all my guests. Obviously, this was something that was, for lack of a better word, very understandably tormented you and really put your family, I imagine, through a ringer emotionally and at all levels. But prior to this, did you ever have any experiences with the supernatural paranormal world?
The only thing that ever happened to me was visiting Fort Oswego one summer. My sister and I were going through the fort, and I saw what I thought was a ghost in one of the buildings. Other than that, nothing.
That was it. So in other words, this was not, when you start having these experiences, because there's people that I've spoken to that ever since basically they're in the cradle, they were either witnessing or having paranormal experiences. So they kind of like, sometimes they spend their whole lives. So let's go to, I mean, it sounds here, what happened? The grandmother, which was this your grandmother or your mom, who was the person that was...
This was my husband's grandmother.
Oh, I see.
That she had a stroke and she needed care. Mm-hmm. She lived next door to them in a house, and they had a housekeeper from Guatemala came to take care of her. Now, I don't... This lady was a nice lady. I don't believe... I wasn't there at the time, so I can just tell you what was told to me.
Right.
She was a nice lady, and anything she did, my mother-in-law thought she did because she wanted to keep my husband's grandmother alive, so that she didn't have to go back to Guatemala.
Right, because in other words, her job hinged on his grandmother being alive. Is basically what you're saying. Okay, yeah, understandably, right. So, what I take it that what she progressively, how long was she taking care of this lady? How long was she taking care of your mother-in-law?
I think it was like two or 3 years she was there with her.
Oh, okay.
And she took very good care of her.
And then what happened? You guys, nothing during those 2 or 3 years, nothing happened, or did anything kind of like did anything maybe not as intense, but
yeah, I can reiterate here, I wasn't there, so like I said, this is just hearsay.
Well,
nothing that they knew of was taken at that time. The only thing they knew was after my husband's grandmother died, that's when this was brought to light. Up until that point, everything was calm.
Wow.
Little things like, a lot of times my mother-in-law would say she didn't want her to come in the house. She would say, oh, she's sleeping, don't. Things like that, but nothing that you would think anything was going on.
Right. No, the reason why I asked is that, how sometimes, of course, in hindsight, maybe somebody visiting said, I had like a weird feeling or I saw something unusual, but nothing intense, but at that point, you just disregard it, either because it's a one-time thing or your imagination, and it's only in the context later on that you say, wow, now I realize back then. So what you're saying is, while your mother-in-law was alive, everything was good. And so then...
Right, the grandmother.
And then what happened?
It's such a complex story.
Okay, no, and I apologize. So I imagine she passed away. And
she passed away in the hospital. That night, Juanita went back to the house because she was living with there. And in the middle of the night, she called up my mother-in-law who lived next door, screaming for help. She said, help me, you have to help me. And my mother-in-law sent her son and his cousin up to see if everything was all right. And this was told to me by my husband. He said when they got up there, Juanita was running out of the house, and behind her was this like ball of light. and it was almost like chasing her out of the house. And he said when she ran, the ball came out into the yard and then just went up into the air and dissipated. Juanita ran to next door to my mother-in-law and screamed at her and said she was sorry. She apologized. She said she didn't mean for this to happen, but she said, please never go in that house again. Don't ever go in that house again.
Wow.
And then she called up a friend of hers, and in the middle of the night, they came and picked her up, and they never heard from her again. Well, a couple of weeks went by, and they were taking care of funeral arrangements and everything. And then they had time to go to the house to clean it.
Okay.
And when they went to the house to clean it, my mother-in-law found bird feathers, blood, strange symbols on the floor, wax where candles were, symbols on some walls. So she got really spooked. She didn't know what had happened.
Right.
My father-in-law helped her. They cleaned the whole house out.
Right.
And they kind of just tucked that away because everything kind of was calm at the time. And then things didn't start to manifest till a few years later.
Right, and I see what you're saying. This is weird, but okay. Right, exactly. And so what did they do with the home? Did somebody live it? Did they sell it? Did they rent it out?
They cleaned it out, and it was a nice little house. They rented it out. They rented it out to a single gentleman. And the only strange thing that Bill told me that happened was a few months after he was living there, he came to my husband and asked him if someone had died in the house.
Oh.
And my husband told him no, my grandmother lived there, but she died in the hospital.
Right.
And that's the only thing was ever brought up. So if something was happening there, they didn't know about it. Then Bill and I got together, and Bill had a bad heart.
Okay.
So we decided to live with his mother and father. There were 3 houses on the corner lot. This is in Rancho Cucamonga on Archibald. If you ever go there, you can still see the lot, which is strange. After 30 years, this prime location is completely empty, and no one has ever bought it.
Interesting.
So there was 3 houses. There was my the grandmother's house, my mother-in-law's house, and Bill's house. Well, Bill's health wasn't well, so we moved in with mother and father. We decided to rent out his house, which is on the other side. This is when things started to happen. The gentleman moved in.
Okay.
He never complained about anything, but my husband rented out the house, but he kept one room in the house for his sports memorabilia. It was an expensive, collection, but he kept it locked. So the gentleman knew that we would be coming down periodically to check on it.
Right.
So we went down one day to check on the sports collection, unlocked the door to the room where it was collected, and all the bobbleheads, he had like baseball bobbleheads, were taken off the wall and put on the floor in the shape of a triangle.
That's weird.
Now, that was the very first thing that I witnessed that had happened. And, of course, you don't think, some thing's doing it.
Right.
We surmised, well, the gentleman got in the room somehow and was just playing around with the sports stuff, because that's what you would think.
Of course.
We confronted him about it. He said he hadn't been in the room. He just used the apartment to come home, sleep, and change. That's really, he wasn't there that often. But we changed the lock on the door just in case.
Right.
And we decided to keep a little more, come a little more often to check on it.
Right.
Then strange things started happening. Things started appearing. My mother-in-law was a very religious woman.
Okay.
And next to her bed, she had a chest, and she had all religious statues on it. And every night she used to pray before she went to bed. Well, she woke up one morning, and on the statue of Jesus was a pair of men's briefs.
Wow. That's weird.
The people in our house are not small; they're big people. So these were small briefs. So she said, what's going on? She thought one of us was playing a trick. What are you guys doing, playing with my statues? Don't do that. That's disrespectful. And we all said, well, none of us did it. So we couldn't figure out. No one could break in the house. We had dogs. We would have known if someone broke in. We had no idea where it came from. Well, this was just the start of the reports. Then soon we started getting jewelry. We started getting all different kinds of things. And then we started getting receipts, some paperwork. And the paperwork had the name of our tenant on them.
Wow.
So we thought, well, this, yeah. So we could not figure out what was happening. So then some things started coming that were expensive things. I remember one thing came was a beautiful man's watch. Well, we didn't want this gentleman to think when we went down to the house we were taking his items.
Right.
So we thought, well, we'll take this back and put it in his house. So, he'll find it and think he just misplaced it. We went down, my husband and I put it in the house. Before we could get back to my mother-in-law's house, it was already back on the chest.
Oh. And was
No,
this about the time that you guys were thinking, okay,
this
is weird. This is like...
Yeah, because it's your brain's trying to understand what's going on because it's like something, this can't happen, but it was happening.
Yes, absolutely.
So then we went down to talk to him again, and we noticed over the light switches in the house were strange symbols. There was a triangle, and at the middle of the triangle at the bottom was a squiggly tail. And there were X's and different symbols. I don't even remember what they were. They were strange symbols. And we confronted him again. Why are you writing on the wall? He said, I'm not putting those symbols there. I don't know where they've come from. Oh. And like 2 days after that, he told us, I'm moving out. This was on a Thursday. And by Sunday, he was gone. He had just moved out. He was gone.
And how long was he there?
Well, we thought probably a month and a half.
That was it?
So, yeah, he was just there a little bit of time. But we thought, well, that's good that he's gone because he was doing these kind of strange things, and whatever was happening was probably associated with him. Right. So if he goes, we're back to normal. Didn't happen. About a week after he left, we decided to go in and clean up. He was a very, very cleanly man, so everything was in pretty good shape. So we came in just to do some dusting and things. We came into the house. I remember walking in with my husband. He went to his room to check on his sports things, and I glanced at the room to see what needed to be done. And along the it was a living room, along the wall of the living room on the top, like a shelf was at the very top of the wall. You'd have to get on a ladder to get to it. And I noticed, I said, oh, this is going to have to be dusted. And I looked at it because it was like 15, 16 knickknacks up there that had belonged to his aunt. And I remember I turned around just for a second to call to my husband, and I looked back at these items on the shelf, and they were turned backwards.
Oh.
Without a sound, in the blink of an eye, all these items were backwards.
Debbie, did you wig out? I would have wigged out.
No, this is the strange thing. That's what everybody asked me. I wasn't a bit frightened. To me, it was more, what just happened? This can't happen. It was more like I wanted to know what was going on. I didn't have any fear. At this time in the house, there were no negative feelings. It was just like a nice open-air house. You didn't have this feeling when you walked in something bad was there or anything. Right. So I wasn't a bit frightened. Now, that was in contrast to my husband, who was petrified of this kind of things. But I told him when I came out, I said, Bill, and I tried to explain to him what happened. Well, of course, he said, what happened? You looked, and then when you looked back, you didn't notice it the first time, because things like that can't happen. I said, okay, Bill, but it happened, and, you don't want to argue. So I said, well, maybe he's right, because you want to think what's real and what's not real. So the first thing was, yeah, you know what, maybe he's right. So we looked around what needed to be done. We were going to come back and do it. Everything was quiet at the house, and we went back again like 2 days later to just do a little cleaning. Walked into the house, and in the middle of the living room was a lamp from the bedroom.
Okay.
Now, the first thing my husband says, oh, someone broke in, and they were taking things, and they just left this in the but we looked through the whole house. There was no way anyone had gotten in, and nothing else was moved with this lamp. And I said, Bill, you're going to have to face it. Something's here. And I actually think a part of me was excited because I was experiencing something that was not normal. It wasn't like in your everyday life that you experience. It was something new. Yes. So my brain was saying, well, what's going on? Bill was very, very frightened. But I said, something's here. So I started saying, if something's here, move something. Let me know you're here. Well, nothing happened. We walked into the kitchen. We came back out. We weren't in the kitchen more than 2 minutes at the most. We came back out, and all the living room furniture was moved to the center of the room.
What? Oh, boy.
Not a sound. You didn't hear a sound. And Bill, by this time, Bill was at the door ready
to
leave.
Say.
And
you're on your own, baby.
You know,
I'm leaving.
But to me, it was like, what just,
right.
you know, it was like, what just happened, Bill? Bill, what's happening here? And I said, you know, he said, no, come on, we got to go. We got to get out of here. I said, well, no, wait. And I wanted, so I asked again. We put all the stuff back, and I asked again, and he moved something else. Well, Bill left, so I left too because he was frightened. Mm-hmm. But I knew something was going on. He knew something was going on. He went home. We tried to explain to his mother and father what were happening. My mother-in-law immediately started to pray.
Okay.
Because she really found strength in God and prayer. That's what got her through this. If it wasn't for her faith, she never would have made it through this sane.
I imagine.
So that's what got her through this. So, and it just progressed from there. Things started happening in the house we were in.
Also, let me ask you something real quick. Did you guys rent out the house again, or what did you guys do?
Okay, here's what happened. Everything stopped.
Oh.
Okay. Everything. It was like everything went back to normal. 1 week went by, 2 weeks went by, and it was like, oh, good. We're just back to normal. Maybe it was just something left over that this guy was here. So we decided, well, let's rent out the house again. So it was all nice and clean. So we rented it out to a gentleman and his girlfriend. She was very nice. He was kind of reserved and a little older and quiet. Okay. And my husband said to them, you know, he was honest with them. He said, this might be haunted, because he was still leery of the house.
Right.
So he wanted them to know. And they kind of laughed it off. I don't know if they thought we were kidding or what, but they didn't care, so they moved in. And she was very friendly. We weren't on a friend kind of a relationship. But every time we saw each other, we would say hello. We lived right next door. And every time she came out, she would talk a little bit. She was a nice lady. And then I noticed if she saw me, she's kind of like not want to be seen. Okay. But I was working in the yard when she came to the car one day, and I saw her, and she had been beaten up. She had a black eye, and she looked like she had been beaten up. And I said, my goodness, Michelle, what's going on? And she told me, well, since we moved in this house, Tom, his name was, I think, was Tom. She said, Tom has gotten really mean. And I said, well, you can't go on like this.
Yeah.
Get away from him. And she said to me, don't worry about it. I can take care of myself. I said, okay, Michelle. I said, but, we're here if you need us. Well, about a week went by, and I didn't see her. Another week went by, still no Michelle. And it was, even though I didn't talk to her some days, I always saw her.
Right. Yeah, I know what you're saying. You don't talk, but you see the person, the coming and the going and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw Tom getting into his car one day, and I said to him, I haven't seen Michelle in a while. Is she okay? Because I was worried about her. And he said, Michelle left. And I said, well, and I tried to make more conversation, but it was like he looked at me and turned around and was like, okay, I'm done talking. And he just went in the house. Well, about a couple weeks after that, he called up one day and said he was leaving. And he was gone like the other guy. He was gone like before. It was like, I'm going, and it's like he was gone.
What span of time were
but
they
he
in
always
there?
Paid his rent. They were in there a couple months.
Okay, so this, whatever was going on, comes on quick, huh?
Yeah. So we went in again, went up next door to see what had to be cleaned. It was spotless. He had sanitized it. You could smell like Lysol. Everything was clean, spotless. And the only thing wrong was we had a big brown throw rug, It was missing, but it was old, so we didn't care.
Right.
He left the place in good shape and everything, so there was no problems. Probably a week went by. Things were going on at our house, just living.
Right.
So one day I was out in the yard again. A gentleman pulled into their driveway, went to their door and was pounding on the door. And I yelled over, no one lives there now. They left. And he said, oh, Tom's not here anymore? I said, no. He said, well, did you hear what happened to Michelle? And I said, no, I didn't hear anything. He said they found her her wrapped up in a throw rug in the garbage dump, and he didn't tell me what city or anything, and she had been beaten to death.
Oh my God.
And I said, I didn't know anything about this. Now, my husband was the type of person who watched every news story, every news on TV, read 4 or 5 papers a day. I mean, that he really enjoyed the news. So I ran right home because I had to tell them what had happened to Michelle. And he said, "Are you sure this happened?" Because he said, I didn't hear anything on the news. I didn't read anything. So this man told me this happened. Whether it happened or not, I don't know.
And you know what? I hate to say it. Sometimes if it's a slow news day, it makes it. But sometimes stuff like that, if there's a lot of other interesting news, it doesn't. So you were like, you must have been like, you were thinking, Tom did her in and wrapped her up in our brown throw rug.
That's just what I felt guilty because I said, "Oh my God, was it something that was in the house?
Right.
Was it just Tom? What was going on?" So from that point on, we decided, no, we're not going to rent the house out anymore. Well, about this time, my mother-in-law was getting really antsy. One of the reasons why the person that lived next door, that gentleman at my grandmother's, her mother's house, when the older gentleman, his son came to live with him.
Okay.
And she used to take our little dog up and down the street. There was no sidewalk, but she'd walk on the side there and take a little dog for a walk. Well, he had his son move in with him, which was fine. He was a quiet boy. He was about 20, quiet, no problem. And she was walking down the street right in front of the house, and she looked over, and he was planting trees in the side yard of the grandmother's house, but he was planting them upside down.
Okay.
He was putting the tree in the hole upside down in the roots to the sky.
Okay.
And she was going to go over. She walked over to try to talk and say, like, "What are you doing?" She said he stopped what he was doing. He just looked her straight in the face, didn't blink, never said a word, and just stared at her.
Oh.
And she said, at that point, she said, "I didn't care how he was planting those trees.
I'm out of here." Oh, sure,
she
absolutely.
Just didn't care. She just wanted to get rid. Yeah, she just wanted to get rid of him. So she went back to the house, and like 2 weeks after that, Monty from that house that was the gentleman who was renting it, he died. And so the young man moved out, and the house was empty. So now we were in the middle, and on each side of us were empty houses. And we didn't re-rent them, but we wanted to move. At this time, my mother-in-law wanted to get out of there. So
let me interrupt you real quick, Debbie.
My mother-in-law...
How long... Because it sounds like, they had purchased these 3 houses at the same time? Or...
They purchased these houses back in the 40s.
Okay.
Actually,
so
my mother-in-law's house and the other house next door, they had them built.
Wow.
So they were built in the 40s, right after the war.
Okay.
So that's where they came. So we were gonna leave. My father-in-law, during this whole time, he was very strange. He wasn't a very nice person to begin with.
Okay.
But it was like he didn't care. It was like none of this stuff mattered to him. It didn't affect him. What did he care?
Right. Okay.
Even though my mother-in-law was very frightened. My husband was very frightened. But we decided we were going to go together because I was very close to my mother-in-law. I adored my mother-in-law.
Okay.
Well, she was a wonderful woman. And so we were going to move together to a bigger house, all of us.
Right.
So they sold the property. We were going to move to a house on the hill right here, still in Rancho, but it's up on the hill, El Paloma. A bigger house, and it was very nice. Now up until this time, even though all this stuff was, now we went back to the house. I mean, we did check on the houses, both houses, and the one that the gentleman with Michelle left. We went in one day, and as we opened the front door, in the backyard was this really big cement tiger. There was a statue his aunt had that she loved, and sitting right in the middle of the hallway was a cement tiger.
What?
Sitting right in the hallway.
So in other words, it was outside in the yard, and it ended up inside the house?
Right. It was out in the patio, and it ended up with all the doors locked right in the hallway. So Bill said, "That's the end of this. We're not coming here anymore." He shut the door.
Oh, crap.
And
I'm getting goosebumps right now.
We were moving, so everybody was, in a good mood. Everything was fine. The very last day we moved, because it was so close, we did most moving ourselves over because we owned both properties at the time, so it was easy to move. So we moved over like a 2-3 week period, just bringing stuff up to the new house. Right. The very last day we were there. Now, up until this time, like I said, there was no feeling of malice, of evil. There was no, that
Right.
feeling. That wasn't there. The last day, we in the old house, we went down to my mother-in-law and I. Everything was gone except there were 2 boxes in her bedroom that we went down to pick up, and we were just going to tour the house to make sure we had gotten everything. So we go in her bedroom and we were going to pick up the boxes, and all of a sudden, from the kitchen, we hear almost like an explosion.
What?
So we both of us run to the kitchen, and whatever was in the house ripped from the walls, the cupboards, off the walls, and just scared them all over the kitchen. So it was almost like an explosion went off. They were just ripped from the walls.
That's incredible.
While we're in the kitchen, we hear glass breaking. We go back to the bedroom. All the windows in the bedroom had been blown out. Not blown in like somebody threw something,
Right.
but from the inside, blown out. I remember I grabbed I don't know why, but I had enough sense. I grabbed the 2 boxes, and my mother-in-law, we ran to the car. And went right, and that was it. We went we went to the new house. At the new house, for the first 3 weeks, everything was wonderful.
Okay.
It's just as quiet as could be. We thought we're away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my mother-in-law, when she got up here, it was a big yard, and she kept thinking about all her beautiful plants, because she was a gardener, that she left down at the old property.
Oh.
So she wanted to go down and dig up some plants.
Uh-huh.
Now, my father-in-law didn't want to go with her, so I said, "Well, come on, Ma, I'll take you down." Because she was a little bit afraid, but then she thought, it's the middle of the day, it's outside, there's people walking all around, cars going by. We'll be fine.
Yeah.
So we went down. She was on the side of the house. This is in the back, pulling out she had a box. She was putting plants in it. I was walking a little bit more towards the back of the house. All of a sudden, I look over at my mother-in-law, and I see her. She was bent over. I see her actually lift off the ground, like someone had kicked her.
What?
And she yelped. So I run over to her, and she said, "Oh, somebody just kicked me." Now, while we're standing there, see, so many things happen, it's just unbelievable. While we're standing there, it starts raining, but it's not raining rain, it's raining pebbles. I grabbed her, and there was a little shed, a little shed in the back. It had a plastic roof. And I remember we didn't even talk. We went into this little shed and stood there, and you could hear the rocks hitting the roof. And it lasted, it seemed like it lasted forever, but it lasted probably 30, 40 seconds. We came out, and I looked, and there were pebbles all over. And I remember I picked one up, and it was ice cold.
Really?
And I remember looking at it. It wasn't ice. It wasn't like a piece of ice like it had been hail, because that's what we thought it was at first, hail. But they weren't. They were stones, but they were ice cold. And I grabbed her arm, pulled her to the car. We got in the car, and that was the last time she ever went down there.
It was like, forget the trees. They're staying there. We'll buy new ones.
Yeah.
Forget
the lawn stuff, so she didn't care. So at the new house, like I said, for about 3 weeks, everything was fine. It was just like we thought, oh, it's down there. If it's still there, it's not here, so we're safe. And we had a very strange. My mother-in-law and my husband were petrified what was going on. Right. My father-in-law was indifferent, and I, for some reason, wasn't afraid.
Okay.
I don't know why. I don't know if I was just, if I just didn't understand what was going on, or I had the feeling that I was safe, that nothing was going to hurt me. So I wasn't afraid of it.
Okay.
So about, like I said, 3 weeks into the new house, one thing happened. A picture. The house is big. My husband and I had the downstairs a master suite, which is big. It's a big room with a sitting room and its own bathroom. It's a big room. Mm-hmm. My mother and father-in-law went upstairs, which upstairs is nice. It had a bed, a bedroom, another bathroom up there, and then it had a big room that was like a game room. It was all upstairs. And they turned that into like a sitting room for themselves. Okay. And so we were kind of far away. Mm-hmm. We got intercoms so that we could, that's all, because if I was in one room, I couldn't scream up to her upstairs. Right. So we got intercoms. Now the intercoms started acting weird. They'd be crackling, turning themselves on. You could hear like voices, but you couldn't make out what they were saying. A lot of times grandma thought she heard people talking to her or calling her name. So we finally just put those in a box and put them away. Then my father-in-law found a picture turned backwards. And it's like, at that point, I just knew this turning things backwards. And it was like, from that point on, it was for the next 6-7 years, it was like living in hell.
And let me ask you, was this, did your father-in-law around this time start believing in some of this now that he saw this, or was he still like,
You know what? He believed it. He believed it was happening because there was no way he couldn't believe it because he was experiencing it. But his attitude was like, no big deal. It was a very strange attitude towards all this. But it was like he wasn't frightened of it. He didn't want to know about it. It was like more like, if I don't acknowledge it, it won't bother me. That type of attitude. Then through the house again, things turned backwards. That's what it loved, to turn things backwards. It was like everything turned backwards. We had in the TV room had a fireplace with knickknacks on the mantels and on the side tables, and you could be looking one direction, they'd be normal. You'd look back, and everything would be backwards in seconds.
Wow!
It would just everything backwards.
That's incredible.
Well, then the most amazing thing started to happen. I was in my bedroom folding clothes or something. My mother-in-law was upstairs, and she called down to me out the steps, and she called, and she sounded like, something was happening. So I ran to see what was going on. She said, "You have to see this." So I came upstairs, and in her bathroom, there was writing on the mirror. And I looked at her like, "Well, what's this? Why are you writing on the mirror?"
Right.
And she said, "I was getting clean towels. I had just cleaned the mirror," she said. "I came back in, and this writing was on the mirror." And I said, "You're sure nobody came up and did this while you were up here?" She said, "I was right here." She said, "They couldn't have got past me on the steps."
Right.
So we called my husband and father-in-law up, and we looked at it. It said, "Talk to me."
Oh.
And it was written in soap on the mirror.
That's weird.
And, well, you can't, even though the weird things were happening in the house and all that stuff, this was to another level. So it was like, I remember thinking, okay, one of us must be doing this,
Okay.
Because you want to find, through this whole thing, you're always looking to find the rationale in it. You want to find something that your mind can make, this is rational.
Yes.
But it wasn't one of us writing, and we proved it by erasing the mirror. We cleaned the mirror. We shut the door. We went outside, and we talked among ourselves. And I remember my father-in-law said, "If anything is writing on that mirror, do it again." So we waited like 5 minutes, went back in, and it wrote on the mirror again. So there was no way anybody could get in that room. The four of us were together. So it wasn't one of us doing it, and there was no one that was in physical presence here that was doing it.
Wow.
And it started, my father-in-law, it talked for a while. It would say, "Talk to me." And then my father-in-law said, "Well, who are you? What's your name? What's your name?" And we left. We came back in, and it wrote Prince. His name was Prince.
And let me ask you, was there a target person? Was it your mother-in-law?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It turned out that this entity loved to talk. Now, if it didn't write on the mirror, if it didn't have place to write on the mirror, it literally destroyed our house. It carved its symbol, that triangle with the tail. It carved it in the walls, and it didn't carve like little. It would carve like 2-3 feet in the wall of the triangle with the tail. It cut out the carpet, the triangle with the tail. It just, and all different symbols all through the house. And every day we wake up and it was like, what do we have to patch today? What do we have to paint today? My mother-in-law was, her father was in the mafia.
Okay.
So since she was a little child, she was taught not to have anything to do with the police.
Right.
Because I know a lot of people say, "Well, why didn't you call the police when this was happening?"
But no, and I understand.
Tell you, the only thing that my mother-in-law was more, so she didn't want anything to do with them. So that's why we didn't call the police.
But if you think about it, what are you going to tell the
"Ma,
police? The police are going to show up and you're going to say, somebody's, writing on my mirror, or, I'm sure the police would have looked at you guys like,
like one of us is nuts doing it.
Right. Or, somebody's pulling a prank.
That's what my mother-in-law would say.
Yeah.
She would say, we can't tell anybody about this because they're going to think we're crazy.
Right.
We got to remember, this was back in the late 80s. And it wasn't like now where everybody is open to ghost hunting
absolutely.
And
I was going to tell
on.
you that people don't realize, because, lately all these reality shows where everybody's like, I got a ghost. I say, once upon a time, people usually were kind of like, no, let's not talk about that. If they had anything going on, they were like, don't talk about this. They don't realize it wasn't always like that.
Yeah, you kept it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what the entity wanted. It wanted us to be isolated. I mean, if we went out of the house together, we would, like I remember once we visited, this is the things it did. We visited a friend of my mother-in-law's. They invited us over for dinner. It was very nice. We had a nice time. We came home, and sitting on our kitchen table was the gentleman whose home we were just in, wallet.
What?
Now, how are we going to explain to this gentleman why we have his wallet?
So it wanted to sabotage your relationships.
And it did. It would, like, if we went to a restaurant, we'd come home and sitting on the kitchen table would be the name. You know how the people that wait on you have the little name tags? Uh-huh. It'd have the name tag of the person who waited on us. It wanted us to know that it was with us. Wow. We'd go to the restaurant, and my mother-in-law would look down at her plate, and her food would be partway eaten, and she didn't touch it. So
that is incredible. So basically, you had no place. It was like no peace. It sounded like you guys couldn't go anywhere.
Right. And it wasn't. You have to remember this. It wasn't like, once a week, once a day. It was from the time we got up to the time we went to bed. Things were going on.
That must have been exhausting.
I mean, like I said, if it wasn't for my mother-in-law having such a great faith in God, she never would have made this, because it targeted her. It then turned all its wrath on her. Wow. It made her life a living hell. She couldn't. It would put knives. If her chair, she'd like have one chair at the dining room table that she liked to sit and read the paper and have her meals and everything. It would put knives from the bottom up, so if she sat down, she'd sit on a knife.
God.
It would put knives in her bed, so that if she laid down in bed, it would stab her if she didn't check. It got so bad we had to check everywhere she went before she could even sit down. It took everything. She couldn't own anything. Her clothes were destroyed. She'd go to put a blouse on, and half the blouse would be ripped, or an arm would be missing. What? It loved to do things like in her shoes. It would take all her shoes, but 2 shoes, and they weren't the same kind of shoe. So if she wanted to put shoes on, she had to wear 2 different shoes.
Oh my! That's it.
I mean, it just tormented my poor mother-in-law. And then this is what happened. One time we got to the point, if she was with me for some reason, the entity wouldn't touch her. She was safe. She would, like, if she had money or even a wallet, it used to cut up her credit cards and then put them in front of her so she could see that they were all cut up.
Okay.
So she used that to give me her things, and if I had them, the entity wouldn't touch them.
Okay.
So I became like her protector.
I was going to say,
that was okay because I loved her. So this one night we were sitting watching television. She got up to go in the pantry. It was like a TV room with the kitchen, and then off the kitchen there was like a little laundry room, and off the laundry room was a pantry. And so she got up, because she usually stayed we're all together. She got up and went into the pantry, and while she was in there, evidently it grabbed her turned the light off, locked the door, and grabbed her by the throat.
Ooh.
She screamed. We went to get her. The door, we found her just getting up off the floor. The light was off. We turned the light, and you could even see her bruises on her neck. So now at this time, they had been upstairs away from us, but it had gotten so dangerous. One of the things Mr. Entity did, he took he loved knives, and he whatever he did, he slashed up their mattress, so they didn't have a mattress upstairs to sleep. It got so dangerous upstairs that they moved downstairs into the master bedroom, so we were all sleeping together in the master bedroom. I went in, and once we stopped going upstairs, it kind of took over the upstairs.
Oh, you're kidding.
You could start going up the steps. Nobody even went upstairs anymore. It was like it took over the upstairs of the house. If you started to go up the steps, you got this feeling halfway up the steps of this heaviness, this darkness around you. So nobody went upstairs anymore. It was like it belonged to the upstairs. But it couldn't write, nobody would read its messages on the mirror upstairs. So it started to write its messages downstairs on the mirror so that we had to see them. So it would talk to us. It talked to me because everybody else was frightened, but I would talk to it. Because if I talked to it on the mirror, like if I went in, here's what would happen. I would go in, it would have a message on the mirror. I would respond to it, clean it, and I had to keep the mirror clean because like I said, if you didn't keep the mirrors clean, it would destroy more of the house. So it's almost like it used up its energy talking, so I would try to make it talk a lot, which it liked to do. So I would communicate with it in the bathroom through the mirror. I got very upset that it hurt my mother-in-law. That was the first time it actually put hands on her. Other than that, it set booby trap, but it never really touched her. So I went in to the bathroom and I said, "Listen, this is how it's going to be." I don't know. You can ask me now. I can say I did. I don't know how I got the nerve to do it talking
You're probably
like this. But
really
I said,
upset and
this
very
is
mad.
the way it's going to be. I said, I'm going to give you respect, and you're going to give me respect, and I will stand for nothing else. I said, you're not to touch my child, because I had a baby during this time, but right before we moved. I said, you're not to touch my child, you're not to touch my husband, and you're not to touch Lee. I should have put my father-in-law in there, but I figured he could take care of himself.
Right,
okay,
yeah.
And I said, and that's the way it's going to be. And I left, and I came back in the bathroom, and he wrote, I will not touch the child, I will not touch your husband, but Lee belongs to me.
What?
So I said, why does Lee belong to you? So for the next hour or so, with the matter of going in, erasing the mirror, coming out, erasing the mirror, he told me a long story. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. This is just what he told me.
Right.
He said that he knew Lee, and actually he knew my father-in-law from a past life, and that he was in a monastery, and he had like influence over monks, and Lee was going to be sacrificed to him, and for some reason the sacrifice didn't come to fruition. It wasn't carried out. It was stopped right before it was supposed to happen. But he said that didn't matter. Lee had been promised, and now he had come together.
Okay, so in other words, he's saying that your father-in-law in the past life was a monk, belonged to a monastery that sounds like they were doing occult rituals, under the cover of a monastery.
Right.
Okay.
Matter of fact, he even gave me the name of the monastery, the Sacred Heart. He told me the whole story. And I don't mean he spoke to me, but he wrote it.
Right.
So it was like, whether it's true, I don't know.
Yeah,
but
you must have been like...
he belonged to him, and he was coming together. It was like living in the Twilight Zone during this time.
And you were like, okay, what in the world? How do I get out? At this point, it must have been like, okay, so what is he planning to do? What if she's mine? That sounds very like final kind of.
Yeah, right, it was. But one thing I noticed, like he could do like that thing just choking her, but he could have choked her to death, but he didn't. Or broke her neck, but he didn't. So there must be rules of what they can do. He could try to drive her insane, commit suicide, but what he had something else planned for her. Now, it got so bad that we started to look for help. Finally, my mother-in-law, when she heard this story, she said, okay, we'll try to look for help. First thing we did, we went to a psychologist.
Okay.
Because I remember reading about it. The Catholic Church said you need, some type of verification that you're not crazy or you're not doing it yourself.
Right.
So we went to a psychologist, the whole family.
Okay.
The psychologist said there was nothing he could do for us. He had never heard of anything like this before. He suggested that we get in touch with a university that studied the paranormal, or get in touch with the church, or somebody that, in this field that could help us.
Right.
So my mother-in-law decided she would try the church. Now, at this time, she wasn't a member of any church. Since her mother had died, she had stopped going to church because she used to go with her mother-in-law. But we had the church right up here by us, and we had one down in Guasti. And for some reason, she chose the one down in Guasti. She went down, and she didn't tell them what was happening. She wanted to get the priest up to the house first.
Okay.
So she went down and asked for a house blessing.
Okay.
So she was so happy because the man was coming to bless the house. She thought, if the church is involved and they come bless the house, we'll be safe.
Okay.
So the gentleman comes, he knocks on the door. We have a foyer when you first come in the house. He never left the foyer. He came in, he stood there, he looked around. My mother-in-law and I were with him, and she said, "Thank you so much for coming." And he just kind of got quiet, and he took holy water out, and he made the sign of the cross, and he said, "All right, your house is blessed now, I have to go."
That was it?
And she said, "Well, wait, yeah." She said, "Don't you have to go to each room and do that?" He said, "No, this is good. Your house is blessed now." Well, then she started getting panicky because he wanted to leave. So she started to tell him what was happening.
Oh.
This man wasn't even listening to her. His eyes were just kind of going around, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, when women get this age, they get a little crazy."
Yeah, but that's why I'm just blessing your
And
house
he
from
said,
the
"I have to
foyer."
go."
Yeah.
And he was gone in his car before you could even see where he went. I mean, that's how fast he ran. And never heard from him again. Well, my mother-in-law was just devastated because she couldn't believe that this was all the help she was going to get. So then from that on, we started looking everywhere. We went to psychic fairs. We went to paranormal bookstores. Because like I said, where do you go back then? Where do you go for help?
Yes.
It's not like you can go online like now. So I mean, then for the next years, it was just a matter of going from person to person. We had the university, I think it was UCLA or USC, Thelma Moss's group that studied this. We had Carrie Gaynor come. We had other religions come to the house. Couldn't help. They would all come, and it was like once they got here, they felt helpless. And Mr. Entity, I mean, he was actually an amazing being. I mean, evil, but he was an amazing being. My mother-in-law was Italian, but her heritage was Albanian in Italy. They were in Sicily.
Right.
And they spoke a dialect called Tobresh, which is a very, very old dialect. I don't even know if it's spoken anymore.
Okay.
But they would speak it, and my husband spoke it, and she spoke it. So at this time, what he would talk about, he would be like, comment on anything we had done during the day or conversations we had had. I remember one thing he wrote on the mirror when the priest was doing the holy water, and my mother was going to go get some more holy water, and he told her, "Go get it. It's just God's piss."
Oh my.
So
let me ask you something. Like you said, you had different religions. They all kind of did like the priest in the foyer kind of deal. Like, oh, this is beyond me, beyond my pay grade. Somewhere out of here.
Yeah, it was like and we had real qualified investigators come.
Right.
And they would we had like Chris Chacon come from some paranormal group, a big paranormal group. We even had Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yeah, wow.
Come to the house.
Okay.
But let me finish about the Tobresh story.
Okay.
Like I said, so that was a very old language. So he would comment on everything we said. So my mother-in-law started talking things she didn't want the entity to hear to my husband in Tobresh. So she thought, well, then he can't understand. He would start answering my mother-in-law on the mirror in Tobresh, writing Tobresh on the mirror.
Oh, wow.
So he spoke Italian. He spoke what else? Latin. He spoke Tobresh. He spoke Spanish.
Let me ask you something, Debbie. Did you guys, when that first time that he gave you that story about monastery and that your father-in-law was did you ever ask your father-in-law? Did you ever mention that story to him, or did he react at all to that story?
Oh yeah. He said he didn't know. It
was like,
See,
okay.
my father-in-law was strange. He was very self-centered.
Okay.
This entity, although it was causing him problems, the one thing my father hated more than anything was it was costing him money.
Okay, yeah.
But it was costing him time too. But since it wasn't centered on him.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, hurting my mother-in-law. He, disassociated himself from it.
Right.
It was like he could sit back and watch and not really be involved.
Okay.
Which, to me, I just couldn't understand that. But, so, like I said, Mr. Entity was amazing. One time, we had different cars. He would destroy my father-in-law's car because they would have to go somewhere. My mother-in-law would have to go with him. So he would constantly destroy their car so they couldn't use it. I remember one time we had 2 different doctor appointments, so we had to take different cars. And I went out to him and said, Mr. Entity, when I came to the mirror, I said, Mr. Entity, please, don't do anything to my mother-in-law's car because they have to go to the doctor. And I couldn't be with her because I had to go with my husband to the doctor.
Right.
So he wrote on the mirror, all right, for you I won't do anything today. They can use the car, but tomorrow I'm going to break the big window. So that day, he didn't do anything to the truck. The next day, he broke the windshield. I mean, things like that. One time, he took the truck and put it out in the middle of the road.
My God.
We woke up in the morning, and the truck was in the middle of the road. It hadn't been started. It was all locked up.
And it
had the ability to abort things.
Yes.
I mean,
well, this is beyond aborting. This is
it
incredible.
brought so many knives into our house. They weren't our knives. He would do patterns on the floor with knives. And we got a big box. We pick up the knives and throw them in the big box till the box got full, and then we just throw it away.
Let me ask you, Debbie, and of all these people that came through the house that you contacted, was there anybody, or either a person or a group, who kind of zoomed in and gave you a description or something that corresponded with what it had communicated to you?
There's 2 good things, interesting things. The first one were the Warrens.
Okay.
The Warrens came, Ed and Lorraine Warren. This was interesting.
Okay.
They came. They were very nice to us. I hear a lot of negative things about the Warrens. But all I can say about the Warrens is they were very nice to us, and they tried to help. They couldn't help, but they tried, and so I thank them for that.
Okay.
They were nice to us. Okay, so they came. The night that they came in late afternoon. In our hallway, there was a kitchen, then like a little dining area, then the family room. There was a little hall there, and we had a big box that was full of Jamie's toys. My son, he was just 2 years old. So he was. As Ed and Lorraine walked down the hall, Ed went by, and then Lorraine came, and the whole chest, it was a heavy chest, slid out right in front of her.
Wow.
Very rarely did you see anything happen.
Okay.
Everything would always happen when you turned your back or you went in the other room.
Right.
But this is one of the times that actually happened right in front of us. We saw it. And I remember they came in. We sat down at the kitchen table. We all discussed what was going on. Then Lorraine said, I'm going to go walk the house. And she left by herself. And she said, I'm going to, so she went through the whole house. She went upstairs. She came back down. She came in and she said, Ed, I have to tell you, this is one of the most powerful, ancient entities I have ever come in contact with. And my mother-in-law said, what? And she said, yes, it's a demon. It's a demon, Ed. And my mother-in-law's face just, because all these things were happening, but nobody ever looked at my mother-in-law and said, you have a demon after you.
Right.
When she said that, my mother-in-law's face just almost collapsed.
Wow.
She was it was. And so they came. They were here like 3 days. They were the second day they were here. Ed said, "We're going to do a rite of provocation." I had no idea what that was, but
okay.
At this time we had a paranormal investigator living with us.
Wow.
So he was here with us at the time. We went into my mother-in-law wanted nothing to do with it, and that was okay because they said she was so frightened. So she stayed in the TV room with my son, the little baby. She sat there with him, take care of him. In the living room, there was Ed and Lorraine Warren on one side, sitting in chairs. Then between them, there was a couch. I sat on the couch with my father-in-law, and then think of this as a U shape. Right. On the other side was my husband and the paranormal investigator. Then they brought a gentleman with them named Kevin Sullivan, I think his name was. He videotaped everything. Okay. The first day they were here, he videotaped. They interviewed each one of us. the second day they did the rite of provocation. This was in the evening. This was, I'm sitting here picturing this because I remember it so well. They started doing the rite of provocation, and I noticed my father-in-law was a little antsy.
Okay.
All of a sudden, my father-in-law stands up, and I don't want to say that he changed, but his mannerism changed. It's not like he metamorphosized into something else. He didn't, but he changed physically in the sense that his carriage changed. He drew his left arm up to his chest like it was a stroke victim.
Okay.
And his head went down, and his back kind of curved. And he got up off the couch, and nobody was saying a word at this time. Ed had stopped the rite of provocation when this happened.
Right.
And he had one of his legs. He wasn't using it. He would drag it as he walked. And he walked over to Ed Warren, and he looked at him. And Ed Warren had, he said it was a little piece of the cross.
Okay.
And it was and he took it up and put it in front of my father-in-law, and he said, "You can't harm me. This protects me." And I remember my father-in-law looked at him in a voice that wasn't my father-in-law's. He said, "I'm going to bite your arm off and that piece of wood, chew it up, and spit it in your face."
Oh, my.
And then everything got really, really quiet. Ed just kind of looked at him. Then my father-in-law turned around, and he faced my husband and the paranormal investigator. The paranormal investigator got so frightened. Now, this is a paranormal investigator.
Yeah.
Got so frightened, he jumped in my husband's lap.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but you know what?
know.
That's like a coming to Jesus moment right there.
I'm sitting there, and I look over, and then there's the guy sitting in my husband's lap. Now, my husband's probably more frightened than he is, but he's going to my husband for security. My father-in-law turned around, walked, dragging his leg back to the couch, didn't say another word, sat down on the couch, and slowly relaxed and went back into my father-in-law.
Let me ask you, when you say he curved his back, backwards or like hunched over?
Like hunched over, like a hunchback.
Like a hunchback and dragging a foot. Wow.
Right. And my father-in-law didn't know what had happened or anything, and I remember Ed said, "Well, it's late tonight. We'll talk about this tomorrow."
And I need to change my shorts. Okay.
So they went, and now we have to remember we're all sleeping in the same bedroom.
I bet.
Later that night, my husband and I had gotten into the habit, but especially my husband, he could not sleep till the sun came up. He was so frightened of what was going on. And you know, that stayed with him his entire life. Oh. He couldn't sleep when it was dark because he had to be on guard. Even when the entity left, he always was like that.
Yeah. It's like a PTSD kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the middle of the night, so we're over there because the bedroom was, like I said, they were in the one part of the bedroom. We were in the sitting room. We had our bed. My father-in-law gets up out of the bed, and we look over at him. And instead of my father-in-law, when he stands up, he turns into the same thing he was earlier. He bends over, his arms drawn up, he's dragging his leg, and he goes into the bathroom.
Oh, and who's seeing this? You and your husband, or just
me?
Oh, your poor husband.
Yeah, my mother-in-law was sleeping.
Okay.
And my husband turns to me and he said, "I think you better call Ed." I said,
Yes.
"How am I going to call him in the middle of the night? What are they going to do?" But he came back out, same way, got into bed, and went to sleep.
Holy crap.
Oh, my God. That my husband was he couldn't shut his eyes after that, I can tell you that.
It's like, Dad, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to sleep out in the living room.
Please.
Yeah.
Oh, and, I mean, that was with the Warrens. But the one person who I really thought could help us was a lady called Dr. Evelyn Paglini.
Yes, I've heard of her.
And you can read about her online, Dr. Paglini. Mm-hmm. I never knew about her. Somebody must have told. I can't. You know, all this happened so long ago.
But let me ask you something real quick.
Memories,
Here they come in. Wait, Debbie, because
yeah,
you know the Warrens are so famous. So what do? They come in 3 days and kind of say, "Sorry, this is beyond our pace." What? They just said we can't help you. That was it.
Okay, here's what they did. The next day they got in touch with us. They said they had a friend who was the head of a paranormal organization in L.A.
Okay.
They got a hold of him, and they arranged for a church. It was it wasn't a Catholic church.
Okay.
It was a
Episcopalian
church.
Okay.
They arranged for us to go. The priest there.
Okay.
The next night, all of us, including the paranormal investigator, went to this church to talk to the priest because he was open to coming to the house to do an exorcism.
Okay.
So we got there. We told him all our story. Very nice man. First thing he asked was Jamie baptized? Now, with everything going on, we hadn't had time to get Jamie baptized.
Okay.
So we said, no, he's not baptized. So that night, actually, Lorraine Warren became my son's godmother.
Okay.
She was his godmother.
Okay.
So we made arrangements for that Sunday, this was like Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
That Sunday for the priest to come to the house and perform an exorcism.
Okay.
Well, first you have to understand my mother-in-law was dominated by my father-in-law.
Okay.
No matter what he said or what he did, no matter how wrong he was, in her eyes, because of her Italian upbringing,
mm-hmm.
he was the master of the house. What he said went.
Okay.
He started on her that night when we got home. You know, you can't have this man come do an exorcism because he's not a Catholic. If you have him come do an exorcism, you're going to be excommunicated from the church. So he harped at her and harped at her. No matter what Bill and I said, he talked her out of letting the gentleman come. The gentleman came all the way from L.A., and my father-in-law wouldn't let me go to the door and even explain the situation to him, why we weren't having this exorcism. He said, no, you can't open the door, just leave him alone.
So in other words, he went from not caring because he wasn't being affected to all of a sudden prohibiting somebody from doing an exorcism. Uh-huh.
Right, for somebody from coming in and doing the exorcism.
Right.
So the Warren said, we're sorry, that's our only contact out here. We're not from around here. It's not like we have our people out here that we can help you more.
Sure.
We're sorry. But they tried, and they were very nice people.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
that makes sense. Yeah.
During this time period, you have to understand, we had all kinds of people come. We had people that if you met, you wouldn't want to be around them, but you were so desperate,
mm-hmm.
you would invite them into your house to try to help you. We had one gentleman came, a nice enough gentleman. He said he was a wizard or something. He came into the house, went upstairs. He wanted me to go with him. I went with him. He brought eggs with him.
Okay.
And he put eggs all over upstairs.
Okay.
Then he started doing some kind of ritual. Well, the eggs started flying through the air and pelting him until he was covered with eggs. He said, see, I don't even remember him saying anything. All I remember him is running down the stairs and out of the house. And then we never heard from him again. Some of the people came. A lot of them, I got the feeling, a lot of them would have to be paid. And I got the feeling that a lot of them came thinking nothing was really here. It was in our minds or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And when they got here, and Mr. Entity showed himself, but not physically, but showed what he could do, they got really frightened.
Yeah, it was like, right. They went into thinking, oh my God, yeah. Oh, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be so interesting, and then all of a sudden, reality hit him like a 2x4 between the. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So we had all kinds of people come from all over. We were talking to people down in South America to come and help us. We had a voodoo lady from Louisiana come up and try to get rid of it.
Okay.
When she was here after she said he left. She came, she did a ritual at the table. She blew, I remember, cigar smoke and liquor, a brandy or something. She spit it all over, and she said to us, now it's gone. And all of a sudden we heard boom in the other room. Went in, and Mr. Entity this was a small bedroom, and it was a bed was one of those bed, high poster bed,
mm-hmm.
and he literally turned the bed upside down in a room where it couldn't turn upside down.
So is that at the moment she left?
And the bed was upside down, and she said, no, when she was here.
No, but what I'm saying is that the point that she said, I'm leaving? She must have been like...
No, she said to us, she said, now, don't be upset. This is just residue.
Really?
And we said, residue can turn a bed over? And then they left, and Mr. Entity was still here. He would give us commentary on everybody that came to the house. But the only ones he never said anything about were the Warrens.
Mm-hmm.
He would insult everybody that came. Like when Chris Chacon came, the investigator, he brought a meter with him to go around the house. And he wrote on the mirror after he left, he said, that man has no juice. He said that machine didn't detect me. So we would get commentary. Everybody that came to the house, he'd either tell us about their sex lives or everything, all personal things about the people that came. So, it was an amazing being. It's too bad it was so evil.
Right.
Because it knew so much. Then, like I said, Dr. Paglini came.
Okay.
Now, Dr. Paglini, she came in. This woman came in with such confidence. She just came through that door. She was like a knight on a steed, going to go to battle. I looked at this woman and I said, "Wow, this lady's going to help us."
Okay.
And she told us all about her past. She didn't mention the Church of Satan, which she had helped founded, which I didn't know at the time. But she had changed since then. She started practicing a different type of magic.
Okay.
But I got the feeling that she was a very powerful woman.
Okay.
She went through the house, and then she said she called. The next day she called on the phone. She said, "I want you to start writing these things on the mirror."
Okay.
So I think my father-in-law did most of the writing. He wrote on the mirror, Dr. Paglini welcomes you to talk to or something. And then at the bottom, she had him write, "God protects us."
Okay.
And we went in and looked after my father-in-law wrote it. And Mr. Entity had crossed off God and put Prince. Prince protects us.
Oh.
And he actually hated Dr. Paglini.
I bet.
Absolutely hated Dr. Paglini. Called her all kinds of names. And all I can think of is people that he'd make fun of and everything, but he never got mad at them. Do you know?
Mm-hmm.
They would come and he would just say funny things about him because he had a very funny sense of humor.
Okay.
He would say funny things about the people that came. He never said a word about the Warrens. Not a word.
Okay.
But I think that Dr. Paglini in some way must have been a threat to him.
Right.
And
yeah.
he felt that he had to insult her to make himself feel. So she was probably our best bet at getting rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
She did this for like a week, all these things, and then she said to me, she called on the phone. She said, I can't get rid of this at your house because someone there is giving him permission to stay.
Oh.
And I said, I don't know who it could be. Yet in the back of my mind, I could think about my father-in-law.
Right.
Because my father-in-law wasn't a happy man.
Mm-hmm.
He just wasn't.
Let me ask you, did you ever do that hunched over thing again? Did you ever see him transform like that again?
I didn't hear you.
Did you ever, after that time that you woke up?
No, that was the last time.
Okay.
After that time, when he went to the bathroom, I never saw that again.
Okay.
That never happened again. But it was still like you knew it was there.
Oh
God,
yeah.
She said, tonight I'm going to do something. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow you call me up and let me know what happens, and I will tell you who's keeping the entity there. I said, okay. Well, that night, as usual, they went to bed. My husband and I were up, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden my father-in-law jumps up, and he was literally shaking and gagging.
Really?
And I met we thought we were going to have to call an ambulance, and it lasted like 5 minutes. And then just as soon as it came, it's just like it stopped, and he laid down and went to sleep like nothing had happened. The next morning she called. I said, "This is what happened." She said, "Your father-in-law is the one that's giving it permission to stay there." She said, "He didn't bring it there." She said, "But he's giving it permission to stay there."
Okay.
And I found out later from Mr. Entity himself. I was the only one that went into the bathroom. It was the guest bathroom in the hall to talk to Mr. Entity, because my mother-in-law, my husband were way too frightened to talk to him. My father-in-law thought he didn't want to talk to it. Well, one time I came out of the bedroom kind of quiet, and I saw him go into the bathroom.
Okay.
And when I went into the bathroom after him, I noticed he had cleaned the mirrors. So he had never done that before. So I asked Mr. Entity what was going on, and Mr. Entity told me, he said, he wants me to stay here. He said, he wants me to hurt your mother-in-law.
What?
He said that he wants me to kill her. Yeah. And I remember he wrote on the mirror the next time. He said, he comes in here and talks to me, and then he erases the mirror so you can't see what's going on.
So he was having his own dialogue going on. Okay.
Right. He wanted, my mother and father-in-law were wealthy. They weren't rich, but they were wealthy. He wanted to get away from my mother-in-law. He wanted to be free.
Okay.
And he thought the only way, how nice it would be if she was dead, he would just, be free.
Yeah, so he's trying to hire the demon
now
hitman?
I'm worried. Yeah, can you believe what kind of, a family has a demon, instead of banding together, one of the members is trying to get the demon to kill his wife. Unbelievable.
Okay.
I remember I thought, oh my God, now not only am I protecting her from the demon, now I have to worry about her husband.
Okay, so
you
were like, at this point, you were like, okay, so what do I do now? It's my father-in-law. What am I going to do? It's like...
And, I tried explaining to my mother-in-law what was going on. She said, he's keeping here. And my father-in-law was, I'm not keeping it here. How can you believe this woman and not believe your own husband? So, she was kind of... But he got freakier and freakier as time went on, so she got more and more frightened of him. Mm-hmm. Till finally it got to the point where she threw him out of the bedroom, so he wasn't sleeping in the bedroom anymore.
Okay.
And then finally, if you've read the book, it's such a complicated story with all the everything that happened.
Right.
It's just...
But still, that's a very...
But like I said, Dr. Pellicer, she said, I can't get rid of it because as long as someone gives it permission to stay in your house, nobody can get rid of it. So then my mother-in-law started saying, well, to my father-in-law, if you keep it here, then you have to leave. But it was, you know how it finally left?
How?
My father-in-law finally left the house. She made him leave. And Mr. Entity stayed. It's not like my father-in-law took Mr. Entity with him, or Mr. Entity stayed when my father-in-law left. But Mr. Entity became a little different. Not so much stuff was going on he would constantly say to my mother-in-law things like, Lee will die, Lee blankly this. But most of the things he started doing now was communicating.
Okay.
As long as I kept him communicating, he kind of backed off at some of the terrible things he would do. And it got to the point where he would tell me things about the past, the present, the future. He would tell me all kinds of... We would talk for long periods of time. It would keep everything calm in the house. So I felt like I was protecting my mother-in-law by doing this.
Right.
And also, the truth of the matter is, it was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, no, I can...
Because I would say to my husband, Bill, can you grasp this? That we go into the bathroom and we're talking to an entity that we can't see, that's in a different dimension, that's communicating me, telling me things are going to happen in the past or things that happened in the future. I said, can you understand? I mean, I wanted to just grab people and bring them in the house and say, look what's happening here. But we couldn't tell a soul. We had to just keep quiet. So finally, it got to the point where, like I said, Mr. Henry told me all different kinds of things about different dimensions, but he wouldn't call them dimensions. He called them levels.
Okay.
He said there were levels. So he told me all kinds of things. Well, we then had twins, Jeffrey and Jessica.
Okay.
We had twins, so we had 3 little babies at the time.
Okay.
And I remember saying to Mr. Entity, why are you here now, Mr. Entity? Nobody here is giving you permission to stay. You're not getting, because my father-in-law was so full of hate. I said, you were being fed all kinds of hate. Now all you're getting fed is love, because we love each other and we're going to protect each other. I said, I think it's time for you to leave. And Gary said, the paranormal investigator who came back again, this is the 3rd time to investigate, he said, I'll take it with me. He said, because my life is so rotten, this thing is so powerful, if I take it with me, it can change my life. I said,
you
Gary,
serious?
Be careful
He said
what you
that?
ask for.
Are you serious?
Yes, he did. He said, he went into the bathroom and he said to it, I'm giving you permission to come with me. What? And I said, Gary, you're going to be sorry.
I was going to say that.
Because the entity hated Gary to begin with. So I went in and said, okay, Gary's giving you a place to go. You have to leave now. And he said, I'm not, and you think about this, this is a demon. This is what he said. I will not work with an inferior being. And I remember thinking at the time, this is a demon, and it says things like this. It was so, even now when I try to understand what it was it a demon? What was it? I don't know what it was, really.
Exactly.
And then he said, and I said, well, why won't you work with Gary? He said, he has no integrity. He has no honor.
It's like, I
I'm
have
not working with him."
standards.
And I'm thinking about, here's the thing. Oh, I forgot to tell you the most amazing thing that happened. The spear.
What happened?
During this time when my father-in-law was still living here, after Dr. Paglini I think it was right before Dr. Paglini, my father-in-law woke up in the morning, early hours in the morning, and he yelped, and he jumped out of bed, and we said, well, what's the matter? And he reached under the blanket, and he pulled out, it was like 16 inches long, excuse me, a spearhead. It wasn't very ornate, but it was very dangerous looking.
Oh, okay.
And I remember looking at it, and he had it, and I said, give that to me. Because I'm going to have my father-in-law have something like that laying next to my mother-in-law.
Yeah, right. Like,
So he handed it to me. I said, this is now mine, because I knew anything that I had, Mr. Entity wouldn't touch.
Okay.
I said, this now belongs to me. And I went into the bathroom, and I said to Mr. Entity. Now, I noticed when I went into the bathroom, both mirrors were full of writing. And the one mirror had, like, instructions how to do something. And I said, Mr. Entity, what is this? And he said, I said, where did it come from? He said, it came from the Congo. He said, I want Andre, because that's what he called my father-in-law, Andre. He said that was his other name in the past life. I want Andre to perform a blood ritual on Lee. Yeah, he said he needs to do that. And I said, Mr. Entity, this was like 4 o'clock in the morning. I said, Mr. Entity, you're never going to use this for a blood ritual. He got so mad, he blew out every window in the top floor of the house.
Wow.
But I remember the next day we took the spear to the museum in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. They told us it was from the Belgian Congo area, like he said.
Okay.
It was over 200 years old. They said the way it was sharp, and they could tell it wasn't used for hunting. It wasn't used for warfare. He said chances are it was used for by a shaman or a medicine
so in other words,
man.
it was a ritual object.
Right. He said, where did you get this? He said, it looks like it's brand new. He said, wherever it's been taken care of. He said, it's like just made. And I said, if I told you where I got it, you wouldn't believe me. So I've had that spear since 1989, I think it was. And I know if I have it, he can't use it on anyone or can't perform any blood rituals. So I know about
this
the spear being with me, it's safe.
This is... So you're thinking, I mean, I don't know how you were able to sleep with your father-in-law in the room after what you saw and with this thing with the spear. I would have been able, like, how can you sleep with one eye open?
Well, a few days after that, she kicked him out and put him into another bedroom. So It wasn't for long that we had to live like that. But it was a time, and I've only touched a little bit of the things that happened because it would take hours to tell you everything.
And Debbie, so here, after Gary, okay, gives him an open invite, which he's like, poo-poos.
Right. And then I said, well, you have to go. And he said, please, I want to stay here. I said, you can't stay here. You have to go. You just have to go. Not that at that time he was doing anything bad. You know what I mean? He wasn't really causing problems. He was just communicating.
Right.
But I couldn't have my family live like that.
Oh, no.
I had little kids. I couldn't have them living with something like that in the house. I just couldn't have it. So I said, no, you have to go. And the last thing he wrote on the mirror the day Gary was leaving, Mr. Entity wrote on the mirror, goodbye, my family.
Oh.
And we never heard from him since.
And I have to ask, what happened with Gary?
Now, Gary, I don't want to tell you his last name because there's problems with Gary. The entity did go with him because Gary said when he moved into a new apartment, Mr. Entity put the triangle with the tail over his door. But he said, when I asked him, tried to talk more about him, he said after that he left, which I almost believe because he hated Gary. And he didn't want to stay with Gary, so I don't think he stayed with Gary. But Gary kind of changed. Gary became more into drinking. He changed. He got more into the psychic, became a psychic.
Okay.
All kinds of things. If you want to find out about, I can talk to you privately and tell you some things.
Okay. So in other words, he went from just kind of dark guy
It's
and to darker. Like, yeah, he didn't sound like a happy man to begin with, though.
And yeah.
So
No, he wasn't. But you know what? The thing was, my mother-in-law and my Bill and I liked him here. I liked him here because he was a witness to everything that happened. So people didn't think it was just us. We were crazy. My husband liked him here because it was another person for strength. My mother-in-law liked him here because Mr. Entity hated Gary so much, half the time instead of tormenting my mother-in-law, he was tormenting Gary. So it was like a win-off for all of us.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you play decoy.
Yeah. But we had so many people come to, so many, it's like you take every horror movie you've ever seen, put it all together, and there was elements from every horror movie in this what happened.
But let me and like, you know what
and yet
it sounds, did your family suffer from PTSD like afterwards? Like, did they really believe, or were they like they say?
My husband did. My mother-in-law did, and my husband did. My husband, for the rest of his life, could not, like, if he was in the bedroom and it was dark out, he could not even walk to the kitchen without either myself or one of my children walking him to the kitchen. Yeah. I know he wasn't weak. I don't want you to think he was weak. He wasn't a weak man.
Right.
He just couldn't. He had this premonition when the entity was here. He was so petrified. He said he kept dreaming about this all the time, that he would go out into the hall and his grandmother, who he adored, would show herself and reach for him to hug him and then turn into the monster, he said. Oh. And so he was so frightened of this happening. So till the day he died, he could not sleep in the dark. There had to be a light on. And he couldn't, if he went out to the car at night, somebody had to go with him.
Right.
He couldn't be in the dark.
Yeah, yeah. And that's understandable.
My mother-in-law, bless her, she had, like I said, she had such faith in God that that's what got her through this, was God. Her faith in God got her through it, made her strong. We had such stuff going on in the house, and it was so consistent that it became our life. I know people don't understand that. But if every day you go through the same kind of thing,
right,
knives and chairs, poisoning your food, this and that, it becomes almost, that's your norm.
Right.
Exactly. After 2-3 years, that's your normal life. So she almost adapted to it. Yes. She'd go to sit down, she'd have to check the chair. She'd go to eat, she had to check her food. It was like that just became our life, and it was just too much. It was just, and Mr. Entity, like I said, he is, I wish somebody would look at the pictures, like somebody really, an authority, would look at the pictures, look at the spear, hear the story, and try to explain it to me. Because it's been 30 years, and to this day, I have such questions.
What happened to your father-in-law?
Respond to me? Why? Like, my father-in-law left. He moved out of state, and eventually died.
Okay.
We never saw him again.
That's so.
And they were married for almost 50 years.
Okay. Let me ask you something. Well, I know that you guys, that she like put him out of the room. Did him leaving the state coincide with the time that this demon just said, "Okay, I'm leaving with Gary," or was it totally different timing?
No, it was completely different timing.
Okay.
He was already gone when Gary was here again. Gary came back when Dad had gone.
Okay.
And like I said, we've never heard from him again. It was goodbye, my family. He started referring to us as his family,
which is not a good thing.
He would say to people that came, don't lie to my family. And I would think, what does he mean by that? You know, There's so many questions I have.
Right.
I don't even know what Mr. Entity was. What was he?
Right.
He was intelligent. He knew things. He spoke all languages. He was evil. There was that evilness to him.
Oh, no, absolutely.
I don't want to even go into it, but he killed a lot of our pets. I don't want to even go into that because it's just too painful to think about that.
Let me ask you something, Debbie.
He caused us 8 years.
Let me ask you, this is the part. I know you guys looked at it as, so you're thinking that he was what, in the background, and when that housekeeper did that ritual, it opened like a doorway? Is that what the theory is?
I don't know.
Okay.
See, that's another thing. Here's what the experts told us, and experts are what they know. They tried to figure out how this being came to us. And when we told him the story about, my mother told him the story about finding these things with Juanita and how she said, burn the house down, don't go in the house again. All they can figure is that she performed some type of ritual and that she opened a door, a portal. And either Mr. Entity had been waiting for an opportunity or he just came through and this was all, he made everything up. You don't know.
Right.
All I can say is what I experienced, And it's like it made me a different person. And because once you're really touched by this kinds of thing, when you see everything that you're taught as a child is make-believe, isn't make-believe.
Yes, exactly. This is not like the movies.
When you have to accept that because you live it, it's like you have to accept that, then your whole consciousness changes. And in a way it's kind of sad because you're kind of protected in the way you think when you're a child, because you think of, it's just you have to be careful of people. But then when you realize I don't just have to be careful of people, there's a whole other dimensions that I have to be careful of that exist that really, this is true. But this is another thing it did. I always believe in balance. That if there's good, there's evil. If there's happy, there's sad. There's got to be balance for anything to exist.
Right.
So I always believed in God, and I think the only reason I got through this and was never afraid is God had my back, and I knew He was. And even though I didn't think, God's got my back, it's like I almost knew that I was protected.
Right.
And it's like when this stuff started happening, I always believed in God, but it was always, even though you believe in God, there's always that little question: is it real?
Right.
Is it real? But after confronting Mr. Entity and living with him, if Mr. Entity can be alive and that evilness and that opposite of goodness is there, then God has to exist.
Of course.
So,
and what?
It did
the fact that it didn't want that exorcism to take place, what does that tell you right there?
Yeah. But it was like, I think back, and although it was a horrible time, and I try, when I tell the story and I tell people about it, I can say how I felt because I wasn't frightened. If you heard from my mother-in-law and my husband, you'd get a completely different perspective.
Okay.
You'd get that fear, which you don't get from me because I didn't have fear. But I look back at it now, and I can look back at it and think about it, and it's like almost like a dream sometimes. But it's like it was the most amazing thing that I could. And I'm glad I went through it. I'm glad I went through it, even though it was a horrible time. I'm glad I went through it because it changed me, and that was okay. It was supposed to happen. Maybe I'm supposed to have this fear because if I have it, nobody can have it.
Right. Well, and you know what? And sometimes you could drive yourself crazy. The woulda, shoulda, coulda. How did this happen? Or why did this happen?
Yeah.
And sometimes. Now let me ask you. And it sounds like you had a really close relationship with your mother-in-law. Did she ever tell you any time during her lifetime, and she had experienced something similar? I mean, obviously not to this intensity or duration, but did she ever tell you, as I was growing up or when I was younger, I had this happen to me?
The only thing that she would talk about was something that happened to her mother, the one that died that Juanita was taking care of, when she was a little girl and she was living in Sicily.
Right.
She was a very religious family. She had gotten lost in the woods.
Okay.
And the Virgin Mary came to her and guided her out of the forest.
Really?
And that was a story that she was very, that really touched her because her mother told her what happened and how the Virgin Mary never talked to her, just took her hand and guided her out of the forest, so she was all right. So that was the only thing. She never mentioned anything about ghosts or paranormal.
Right.
That was the only thing out of the ordinary that she talked about, was that.
That's very interesting. That really is very interesting. And it's, let me tell you something, that thing about your father-in-law being so giving permission, because a lot of the things, almost like when you said that the pebbles were coming down, that's like very poltergeist. You hear a lot of poltergeist cases where they have stones coming in. Sometimes they're colder, sometimes they're hot to the touch. When you said that, I was thinking poltergeist, but obviously this is beyond poltergeist, especially the duration, because usually poltergeist stuff is only a few weeks, and then first you need an adolescent, prepubescent, and then it dies off after a couple of months or whatever. But and that apporting thing.
Yeah, the ports. That's the thing that to me was the spear, the ports, the moving a truck. I mean, the things it could do. What couldn't it do?
So what happened? Did you move at some point from the house, or what happened?
No. I would not move. This is our house. Okay. This is my house, and that's what I told him. He's going to have to leave. I'm not.
Okay.
And it's been 30 years, and he's never been back.
Okay. And and you also mentioned earlier that corner where the three houses were at, that it's that's on the corner of Archibald and Arrow. People can even drive by if they're in Rancho Cucamonga and see it. This is across from it is a school. It's a very, it's Archibald Avenue. It's good property on there. Let me ask, did they demolish the houses, or are they still there?
Yeah, like a year after we left, they took the houses down.
Really?
They were just going to trying to sell the property. And it's been 30 years.
That's a pretty long time.
And I remember a friend of mine who has tried to investigate, and a lot of people went into going to buy it, and then all of a sudden they back out. So 30 years, no one has developed that property. Sometimes they'll use it to park trucks on when they're doing some kind of construction in the area. They rent it out. But other than that, it's completely empty. And it's a beautiful spot. It's like 4 or 5 lots right on the corner. You can Google it and look at it.
Let me tell you something. Yeah, that's a pretty long time. Okay, so Debbie, let me ask you, as far as the book, what's your website? Or can they get it at Amazon, or where can they get it?
Yes, you can go to Amazon and get it. Okay. It's there's two versions. One is a fiction version, which is based on a real story. The book is more of a story.
Okay.
But it touches on what happened. The other one is more of a documentary, with pictures. See, I think the pictures are
sure.
I'm fascinated by the pictures, even though I took them. So that's called Unwelcomed, The Unwelcomed, and it's a book. It's more of a what happened, but it's not too much filled with emotion. Like I said, if it had been my mother-in-law, it's more of like a documentary that I'm telling you. Listen, this is what happened. It started out as being. I was going to just make a picture book because I wanted people to see the pictures, because I over 200 pictures of 30-year-old pictures of what happened back then, of the demon writing, of the things it did. So I wanted people to see those.
And let me ask you, after that, let me ask you, and I know you told me that your husband suffered from PTSD and your poor mom-in-law, God. Was there a point, I'm sure for you, that you really were finally truly convinced this thing is not coming back? That's it. It's done. How long did that take?
Do you know what? Because we lived in the same bedroom for 2 years, 3 years afterwards, we still stayed in the same bedroom together.
Oh, okay.
My mother-in-law couldn't sleep alone. So it took 2 or 3 years for her to even go to the bedroom next door to us.
That's
That's how long it took before.
And that's why I asked. Because I was thinking to myself, after so many years of enduring this, I was thinking, this had to take a bit to say, and like you said, after you had all these people come through the house and, and even people that, like the Warrens, and they're still it didn't happen. I'm thinking, everybody there must have been waiting any minute now. It's going to say, I'm back, like one of those things like from the Poltergeist movie. I'm not surprised that you're telling me that your mother-in-law had to spend a couple of years still not almost ready to actually believe that thing was totally gone.
Yeah, it just doesn't go away. It's in you live it. You're scarred.
Yes, that's PTSD. That is PTSD. That people don't realize sometimes that, because everybody thinks of PTSD as in wartime events, or experiences. And people can have PTSD exactly by what you're describing. It could be a one-time thing, or it could be systematic, like what you guys endured for all those years, where like you said, you guys had to live your life, but all of a sudden your reality, you had to incorporate it into the reality of your daily life.
Right. It did. We changed.
Yes,
Our
absolutely.
reality changed, and I think what made it really bad was we were isolated.
Yeah.
If we had a lot of friends or people, I just came out here from New York, so I didn't even know anybody out here.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have anybody to rely on, and my
Right.
mother. In fact, like I said, it would make it impossible for us to have friends because
Right.
it would do things that you couldn't explain.
You know.
So it isolated us, and I think by isolating us, it made it even worse.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. But you know, like I said, this is the most amazing story, and I
Yes.
kept silent about it for so many years that I, even to this day, talking to you, it's very cathartic. I just feel telling you about it. I feel good about it. You know,
Yes.
it's like I want
Yes.
people to know these things. It's real. It happened, whether you
Yes.
believe me or not. It
Right.
happened.
Exactly. Right.
It doesn't change that it happened. It did. So it's just an amazing story.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Debbie, I want to thank you so much for sharing this information. And if you could give out for my podcast listeners, which even though I'll have a link in the credits, what is your website address?
It's adeadlyhaunting.com.
Deadlyhaunting.com. Great. Thank
Yeah.
you so
And
much.
thank you so much.
You
It was
have
great.
been like, I've been like, there was a couple of times where I had goosebumps on my arms. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. And we tell you, fascinating story. So I urge everybody to go to your website and also the books on Amazon. Again, thank you so much. You have been a wonderful guest.
Thank you so much.
Darling, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Let me tell you something. I think would have gone through underwear like, you know what? I know there's people go, Marlene, I know you've talked about this before. Yes, I have. You know what? For those people, and the reason why I say this is, for those people, you know, even though, you know, based on what she said, eventually it got crazy. But did you see it didn't go from 0 to 60 3 days later, like what you see in the movies. It was something that started kind of weird, but not really scary. Like, okay, this is like, they're blaming their tenant. You know, they're blaming the tenant. They're like, they're not thinking beyond the ordinary. And this is what I'm saying. You know, your people are engaged in life. They sound like they're a young couple, starting a family, in-laws, normal stuff. And again, did the grandmother caretaker have anything to do with it? Was that coincidental? Could she have opened up a portal? No. In my experience, and this is the thing that sometimes people don't understand. Maybe the caretaker's motivation, okay, was purely, and I'm not going to say selfishness. This lady depended on this job and she wanted to stay there, and she knew that her job, her way of basically maintaining herself was as long as this elderly patient or this person was alive. There's nothing selfish. It's like, come on, you know, if this is your job, you know, this is like if you work at some place at a company, the last thing you want is for it to shut up and leave, or, you know. So my point being that this, if the point of entry was the ceremony or whatever that caretaker did, even though her intentions might have been to keep the grandmother alive because she needed the job and she knew that once this lady passed, they would have no need of her services, still the results were very dark. Because again, when you mess with things like this, again, if there was any blood, animal sacrifice, or, you know, they're saying feathers. I mean, at this point, they really don't know what it was. But obviously, this lady wasn't lighting candles in the Catholic Church, is my point. And the reason why I say this is that everybody thinks that a lot of the South American countries, yes, it's very heavily Catholic, but they do have religious practices sometimes of, like when you have this, the what's happened with a lot of like the voodoo and the Santeria, where they mesh Catholicism to indigenous, uh, or African belief system, and they come up with something. In all these countries in South America and Central America, they have a version of that where they've taken indigenous beliefs and they've meshed them with Catholicism. And the person practicing it could say, not all, but a lot of them consider themselves Catholic, but they also learn, because this lady obviously, and this is the difference also, without knowing the particulars, there's people that will believe in these types of different kind of occult practices, or kind of like a Catholic slash whatever. They believe it, and maybe they'll wear an amulet or a talisman, but they don't practice it in the sense of creating the ritual or the spell work or the items. In other words, they got to go to somebody, okay, and they'll say, for example, hey, I need a blah blah to keep my lover faithful, whatever. And then this person will prepare something for them and give it to them. So they believe it, but they really don't practice it, or they have the knowledge of the preparation. If this lady had all this stuff in her house, chances are she was practicing it. Maybe she had somebody come in and do it, who knows? But chances are she practiced it. And even though it sounds like the next day she's hightailing it out of the house, again, even if she practiced it or somebody told her, do this, do that, my point being that there's sometimes people that don't know what they're doing, but they're successful. It's almost like, beginner's luck. Yeah. Everybody thinks that sometimes invoke certain beings or spell work, you have to be very experienced, or for anything to happen. Not really. Sometimes people, they do it and it happens, and of course that's the worst thing, because they can't control what it is that they do. And as a matter of fact, if you think about it, if you have an entity from the other side that is trying to break through to this dimension, don't you think a practitioner or quasi or somebody doesn't know what they're doing, this is the perfect person that they want to be invoking them. Somebody that has no idea what they're doing, so much less knows how to control them or banish them or anything like that. And then we go into, okay, what this entity was telling Deborah about, her mother-in-law being promised, in a prior lifetime, the father-in-law being a reincarnated monk where they practiced occult ceremonies in a monastery. I mean, it sounds far-fetched, but why not? But then again, these things are deceptive. They'll tell you a bunch of true stuff, like, certain things, just to make you think everything that it's describing is absolutely true, and then it will twist what it wants in the lie in there. All right. So I think that the story she says is fascinating. It's a cautionary tale for those people sometimes that want to dabble in things, and I've heard that some people dabble, and I've said it, and then when they want to put the brakes on and backpedal on it, they can't. Even in that thing that she described, how her father-in-law was possessed, that was wow. And again, this, like she said, which I was surprised, because to be honest with you, if anybody had the attachment, I would have thought it was her father-in-law. Obviously he wasn't a nice person, and if he's going in there and trying to converse with a demonic being, basically trying to use it as a hitman, it's like, what is that? Okay, so I would have thought that if anybody that was carrying this around would have been him. That's why I asked her when he left it, what happened? Was that the point that it exited? Or, like, what was it that allowed him, how's that, to be able to surrender his wife, or the soul of who his wife was at this point, to a demon. And very riveting story. So guys, wow. Make sure to check out her books, and you've seen the covers, and if not, you can. Deborah Moffitt, Moffitt, and again, the website is adeadlyhaunting.com. If you want more information, if you want to see the book covers, which are available on Amazon. Let me tell you something. This sounds like the kind of books that you read, and then of course you go to sleep with the lights on, at least for a bit. So again, guys, thank you so much for being part of my audience. You're all wonderful, and sleep tight.